overreaction. I mean, you can't give away yards. I don't think this is a good enough team to just be able to hand out 80, 90, 100 yards to their opponent per game on penalties like we've seen in the preseason. So, yeah, I think the Eagles are improved. You know, we can talk about the NFC not being as strong as the AFC, but the margins are skinny in this league, and the Cowboys have lost some personnel. I think this could be very damaging to them, obviously. It almost feels too obvious to say if they don't get that under control.
We're going to hear from Dak on that a little bit later in our show. In the meantime, the next one. If I were to say the Raiders are a legit threat to win the AFC West, would that be an overreaction?
It's not. We put up yesterday, everybody picked a different team, all four of them. So, like, everybody. This is a team that made the playoffs last year when everything was falling apart around it. And the quarterback is still there. A lot of the core players are still there. They add Chandler Jones. They add Devontae Adams. I don't think anybody in that AFC West is taking them lightly, and I don't think they should.
I actually am picking the Raiders.
There you go.
To win the AFC West, which is the worst news they've had.
It's not an overreaction.
In this entire preseason. Well, if you've seen my hashtag KOD, it's definitely not good news for Vegas. Finally, I feel like people are saying this. The Patriots could finish last in the AFC East. Is that an overreaction?
It's not an overreaction. I'm not predicting it. I think that a lot would have to go right for your beloved New York Jets, obviously, to finish ahead of them. But the Patriots have some problems. We have heard terrible reports about offensive line play. We know about all the change on the coaching staff. The quarterback we like, but he's a second-year guy. He's still growing. There are concerns there. If everything really broke the wrong way for them, health-wise, et cetera, I don't think it's out of the question. I think their personnel is seriously questionable.
Look, it's been two generations since the Patriots were a really bad football team. But you're starting to hear whispers from people around, sort of peripherally around them of real concern. I want you to look at a tweet from Patriots linebacker Ted Johnson. You all remember Ted, obviously. And he tweeted, "I think there is a feeling for people who've covered the Patriots for a long time that they can't believe what they're seeing from them so far. The way things played out in the last preseason game versus the Raiders just confirmed what we've all been thinking." Now, again, preseason games don't count, but they matter. And so people watch this and they think to themselves, that doesn't look like them. We don't think that the personnel is that good. In Bill, we trust, but how far can that take us? Ninko, I mean, I know that this is still in your heart. Are you concerned?
Well, I still live locally, so I don't want eggs all over my house. But again, yeah, I'm concerned because when you look at the Patriots and previously, they always had some type of identity going into training camp or in training camp, and they were building on that. So now you have a new coordinator. You have a question mark on who's calling the plays. It's not out there yet, but we know. You have an offensive line that's trying to adapt to a new system. So again, with those things in place, when you watch this last preseason game, you kind of want things to be rolling in a good way as opposed to playing poorly on your last preseason game. And look, in the past, September, yes, there's always some changes that are going to happen in the first couple weeks of the season, and you're trying to adapt your team and your roster, manipulate your roster to help yourself. But with not having an identity, I think that's going to be their biggest obstacle, is trying to figure out what are we offensively right now? What are we trying to do? So they need to figure that out fast, because in September, if they only win one game, you're in trouble. You're in a tough spot.
Because you were telling me this morning, you think the first two games are
critical? They're vital, yes, because playing down in Miami is always really hard. And there's a lot of tough battles down in Miami. Week one, it's hot. But that game in particular, the Miami Dolphins, everyone's flying high on the Dolphins right now. So if you go down there and you don't look good and they beat you up pretty good, then that's not good. Then in week two, you got the Steelers that have question marks at the quarterback position. We don't know who's the starting quarterback right now. So if you go down 0-2 to start the season and you're still trying to figure out what you are, that's tough.
And then look what they have.
And then after that, you're about to hit a steamroller. So it's tough. They need to figure it out fast.
So he's concerned. You have been like the leader of the Patriot bandwagon and Mac Jones for MVP and all of that. Are you starting to waver?
None. Zero. They have a great quarterback. They have a quarterback that's the second best quarterback in the division, and that's a great equalizer. They can run the ball. Greeny, there's a great expression that applies here, which is, how do you control the game? They can control the game with a quarterback that won't make mistakes. They can run the ball. I think they're a little bit more explosive than people are giving them credit, although they lost Thornton, their second-round receiver, who is fast.
Speedy.
So that is a concern. And defensively, they may not be dominant, but with Coach Belichick, they're going to be solid and fundamental. So they're still going to be a tough team to beat, and I think Mac Jones makes enough plays where they're in the playoff conversation.
The concerns that keep sticking out to me when people who have seen them, people have been around them, say the offensive line looks really bad. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to run the ball? Like that's a question. So I just feel like we're going to watch them over the next week, right? A lot of teams, as you know, obviously, Mike, they're going to pick up players that get cut from other teams. Probably going to be a little bit of roster turnover still to come in New England between now and the first game. So the kinds of players they pursue and bring in will tell you what they think their weaknesses are.
And formerly, when you would play the Patriots, they usually used the fullback or they had heavy personnel. Well, now they're changing, and they want to be more similar to what the rest of the league is. So they're 11 personnel. They're trying to go 10 personnel, which everyone's like, what's 11? It's a one tight end, one back.
Correct. Yes.
So they're trying to be lighter, and that's speed, right? And when you run those zones, the offensive line everyone has to be together.
And I just want to make sure Napier in Gainesville, and then the big one, Saturday night. The traditional powerhouse Columbus game in Columbus, number 5 Notre Dame, number 2 Ohio State, just the 7th all-time meeting between these two legendary programs. And Vegas does not expect much of a game. Ohio State is a 17.5-point favorite. That information was relayed to the coach of Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, yesterday. Here's what he thought of it.
Well, I didn't know that. I'm going to write that down. You said 17.5 points, right? We'll use that in the team meeting today, It's good to know. I haven't paid much attention to the spread, but I remember that one time we were on College Game Day, I said just keep making go up and up.
So he says those are fighting words. Here are Heather and Paul with the very latest. Paul, what did you think of that? 17.5 points. He's putting it up on the bulletin board. What do you think?
Greeny, is Newt Rockne rolling over in his grave that the Notre Dame coach is feeling disrespected because somebody in Vegas doesn't make him the favorite? I mean, this is really ridiculous because everyone knows Ohio State, or should know, that Ohio State is one of the best teams we've seen in a long time. And Notre Dame is going through a transition. So Coach Freeman, we all love you, but calm down. And I know Notre Dame fans are ready to get angry again, Greeny. When I was here a couple weeks ago, I dared to say that they were going to lose this game. I think I heard from Lou Holtz. I heard from pretty much every Notre Dame fan in the world, with the exception of Pope Francis.
but I won't understand. He's trying to get your number, and it just hasn't worked out. Heather, here's the question I got a lot of people asking me. Okay, we think Ohio State is one of the top 2 teams in the country. Maybe they look better than Notre Dame. But how can Notre Dame be the 5th-ranked team in the country and be a 17.5-point underdog? Those two things don't seem to go together, Heather. How do we explain them?
Well, Notre Dame being the underdog has a lot to do with what Paul just said, but they're also missing their leading wide receiver, Avery Davis, who is out with a torn ACL for the rest of the season. They have already thin position. Nobody behind him has caught more than 20 catches, and only one player with starting experience. So they have to figure some things out offensively. I talked to Marcus Freeman, and he told me their number 1 priority is running the ball. But defensively, Greeny, this is a big reason why they're the underdog, is because they're going against the number 1 offense in the country with C.J. Stroud at quarterback, a Heisman contender. They've got Travion Henderson at running back. I mean, they've got Jackson Smith-Njigba at wide receiver. They've got to stop that running game. And Marcus Freeman told me that they want to have Stroud hold on to that ball just a little bit longer so that they can fluster him and force him into some mistakes. But that is a tall, tall challenge for the Irish.
Let's talk about what's at stake here, okay? Because some might look at it and say because Notre Dame doesn't play in a conference and the rest of their schedule isn't what it might be if they played in the Big Ten, as Ohio State does, that they need this game more. But if I wanted to make an argument, Heather, this game is in Columbus. Ohio State looks like they are going to have a huge season. That if Notre Dame plays them tough, if they lose 36-10, then all bets are off. But if they lose this game 36-30 and they're right in it in the fourth quarter, I would argue this game actually might wind up working in their benefit as the season goes on. How do you assess what's at stake for the Irish on Saturday night?
Well, how they play matters. And you pointing out that 2 scenarios in the scores is extremely important, because if you're an independent like Notre Dame, you have to remember the selection committee protocol requires everyone in that room to deem them unequivocally one of the 4 best teams in the country. What does that mean? That means there's no doubt in that room that they're among the 4 best teams. And Greeny, here's why, if it is a close game, you don't write them off entirely. Remember, they play Clemson and USC. What happens, Greeny, if they win the rest of those games on their schedule? Clemson wins the ACC, and USC, by some chance, wins the Pac-12. You've got a 1-loss Notre Dame with a close loss to probably the Big Ten champs and 2 wins against Power 5 conference champions. You're looking at a very strong resume for the Irish without a conference championship game. But the reality here is if they lose that game, they've got to win out and they have got to look the part, because I go back to that protocol, unequivocally one of the 4 best teams.
Fair enough. Paul, go ahead with what the stakes of this one on Saturday night for both.